There's another one I held in my heart. WHJD. What has Jesus done? What has Jesus done for me that gives me the strength to do what Jesus would do? And another example was the Mohawks, the sky-high Mohawks. I dealt with a lot of weirdos that had the Mohawks clear up to here. And the problem that they encountered was that the hair didn't have enough strength on its own to stand up that high, to stand up straight, even with all the hair products. So they would wrap gutter spikes, their hair around gutter spikes. And being geniuses, pointed it was down. As a police officer, that gave me great strength and comfort. Yes, Lord, I just confessed another sin. Okay, our sermon begins from the Gospel of Mark, 7th chapter, verse 13. This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. So prophesied God through Isaiah. So spoke Jesus in condemning the Pharisees and scribes who accused his disciples. What does the world see when they observe members of this congregation going about their daily lives? Do they see Christians living out the gospel? Walking in the same way that we sing, pray, and preach? Or do they see speech, behavior, and actions contrary to our Sunday morning talk and our Sunday morning worship? Do they see us acting certain ways on certain days with various personalities? If so, it is only natural and sensible that they will begin to question our sincere commitment to Christ. They will put us under the microscope of scrutiny and the unblinking eye of examination. As they analyze the findings of their inquisition, they may well discover that the church is indeed guilty of a crime. The crime of false advertising. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. Here Jesus throws down the gauntlet to hypocrites. The hypocrites back then and the hypocrites of today. If you can't deliver, don't advertise. Life in this world consists of one advertisement after another. If we are to be honest, we must admit that we are all affected by advertising. We tune into advertisements. We tune in to the degree that we subconsciously learn and repeat the jingles. Advertisements become so much a part of us that we remember them for years and years to come. I wish I was an Oscar Mayer leader. Advertising is so influential that our federal government established the Better Business Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission to monitor advertising. When someone advertises something they can't deliver, they are required to rescind that claim. How many times have you seen a product offered in a newspaper pull out, but upon going to the retailer, find out that they didn't actually have that which you thought? Think of our traditional Black Friday. A big screen TV or a computer offered at 1/10 retail price. And usually down there in very small print, limited quantities. Yeah, 1 or 2. That's fairly limited. The retailer advertised but couldn't deliver. And so people left the store disappointed and understandably upset. You may even have decided to take your future business elsewhere. Such are the risks and hazards of false advertising. So, if you can't deliver, don't advertise. And tragically, because of false advertising, some churches are literally bringing embarrassment upon the body of Christ. False advertising destroys our testimony. It kills our witness. False advertising can have the cumulative effect of turning seekers away from Christ to put their faith elsewhere. I declare that this child will grow to be healthy and happy. I can do that, but that would be false advertising. I would be telling you about me. I would be advertising me that I can do this. I can't. I don't have the slightest idea. Because like you, I'm just human. But if I did that, I could give you false hope. And that is not only sin, it's a crime. Such things are in the purview of the greatest authority. The triune God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. It is for them to make the decisions. It is for them to make the declarations. It is for them to make the outcome. And in particular cases like this, that involve birth, I defer to my greater authority, Vicki. Vicki worked for a period of time as a nursery supervisor in a hospital in Omaha. She tells the story of a child that was born weighing 1 pound. No, you said 1.1 pounds, which would be like 1 pound 3 ounces. Well, anyway, the demagogues of the hospital, the doctors, declared that this child would not live. But thanks to the postnatal nursing team, the child did live and thrived. As far as we know, is doing just fine today. So again, I have no idea what will happen in the case of John Andrew Thomas Van Wijnen. I know he's got several steps ahead because he was named after not one but 3 saints. And I pray constantly that. Vicki also informed me that the next 4 to 5 weeks will be the most critical in whether or not this child survives or thrives. So I don't know about you, but I'm going to be wearing the knees out of my jeans for about the next month and a half. Because that's all I can do. I'm just human. An ancient story tells of a man who fell ill to the ground between 2 villages. This incident occurred exactly halfway between the 2 villages, which presented a problem to the authorities as to which village should take care of the stricken man. A vital decision had to be made regarding which community that man actually lied the closest to. And therein lay the disagreement. One village maintained that the distance should be measured from the man's navel. The other village argued that it should be calculated from the man's mouth. The outcome of the little drama was transparent. As the 2 communities argued over the legality of the problems, the stricken man died. And another story. Do you recall the story of Gulliver's Travels? Gulliver came to a land of tiny people. Little. Do you remember the legality that the Lilliputians were going to war over? The major bone of contention centered on whether one should crack the big end of an egg or the little end. The 2 sides became known as big enders and little enders. And they were opposed to one another. The history of civilization reveals that people have hated, people have gone to war, and people have killed one another in the name of legality. Bloody conflicts have arisen because some established law that one side perceived righteous, the other side did not. Laws are established with good intent of shaping and maintaining the conduct of society. However, laws that become harmful to society when the law becomes more important than the principle that it is intended principle that law is intended to uphold. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition. Jesus took on the problem of law subverting principle in our gospel lesson this morning. The scribes and Pharisees had come to Jesus to discuss the fact that his disciples failed to wash their hands before they ate, an act prescribed by Jewish law. To understand this encounter between Jesus and these upholders of the law, let us understand the Jewish law that the accusers were working from. God's law as given to the nation of Israel in the book of Deuteronomy and the book of Leviticus. This divine law was given in broad principles so that people might have some freedom in interpreting the law for themselves. We've been given the power to think. God only asks that we use it. But about 500 years before Jesus was born, a group of overseers emerged, known as the scribes. The scribes were insistent upon holding the letter of God's law as they interpreted, not as each individual interpreted, not as it was brought to the hearts of the people, but as the scribes interpreted. So they developed their own oral law, known as the law of the elders, to put exactness into these broad principles. Over the course of time, the broad principles of law became lost to the exact rules and regulations that were being poured out almost on a daily basis by these scribes, because they, of course, were so much smarter than the rest of us. For example, the hand-washing law metamorphosized into something like this. Before one ate, one must pour 1 1/2 eggshells full of water over one's hands, but not just in any manner, but in this prescribed manner. He must hold his hands with the fingertips upwards and pour the water over them until it ran down his wrists. He must then cleanse the palm of each hand with the fist of the other. He must then hold the hands with the fingertips pointing downward and pour water on them from the wrist downwards so that it ran off the fingertips. This painstaking process was not a matter of hygiene, it was a matter of ritual. Even if the hands were spotless, this ritual must be done. To do so was to please God. To fail to do so constituted sin, in the opinion of the scribes. So it was obvious that the scribes and the Pharisees were troubled as to why Jesus' disciples didn't wash in the prescribed manner. But Jesus does away with these oral laws. With one sentence and in one breath, you abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition. Jesus saw in them that they were not worshiping God but the law itself. He saw that the law, through its exact application, was being used to turn people away from God instead of being used to bring people to the love and mercy of our God. Jesus continues his lesson by revealing that it is not what is on the outside of a person that renders him unclean. Rather, it is what resides in his or her heart that really matters. Jesus clearly realized that religious adaptation was being utilized in order to escape the only true and meaningful religion, the worship of God. The religious leaders were using the laws of men to abuse the ordinances of God. They sought to gain respect, position, and wealth over the people, rather than demonstrate that God's law leads to God's love. By his condemnation, Jesus was freeing the people from the tyranny of the externals and giving them a freedom to live with the laws, the law of love, which resides in their hearts. Jesus prescribes only 2 laws in the whole New Testament, and these two fit hand in glove, and always have and always will. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. First and second commandments. And the simple fact of the matter is, if you really consider it, if we can follow those two, the rest of it will fall into place. Notice Jesus doesn't venture beyond the broad principle of these two laws. He doesn't define in exact detail how one should love God and how one should love a neighbor. But in the remainder of Jesus' teachings, in the way he lived and in the manner he acted, he demonstrated how one is to love God and love one's neighbor. Jesus gives us the freedom to express our love for God and for our neighbor in our own personal style, in our own unique and God-given way. The religious leaders of Jesus' day had lost the concept of uniqueness regarding the human race. God has created each of us to be different. Look around. We're all different. In that uniqueness, we all have different talents, different methods, and different abilities to worship God and to love our neighbors, to love them as ourselves. We have been given the freedom to express our uniqueness as we live our Christian life. But notice the broad principle still stands. The command is to love God with our whole being and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Therefore, no option exists to not follow or live by this command. God's command to those of us who strive to be his followers. It is God's command for those of us who have been called by him in love and mercy. And this command does not have any room for slack. Okay, God, today I will worship you because I don't have anything better to do. Or today I will be good to my neighbor because I feel that matters. No, this command transcends all of life. This command cannot be switched on or off according to whim or circumstance. This command is a reality that the people of God are commissioned to live with and to live by. But exactly how do I worship God and know I love my neighbor? That is left up to my own uniqueness. You see how radical Jesus' declaration really is? He places each and every child of God in a unique position to be of special importance to our Heavenly Father. I believe that God delights in the way that each of us uses the resources he or she has been given to worship him and to serve him and our neighbors. And such freedom to live within the principle of the law is far more difficult than living by the letter of the law. Living by the letter of the law is easier because it's all spelled out in black and white. Speed limit 25 miles an hour. Handguns are not allowed to store. I don't have any, just taking responsibility for my own actions. If I follow the law, I can say it is a good law. If I cannot follow the law, I can say that's a bad law. But when I am given the freedom to express the principle of the law in my own way, then I have to take full responsibility for my actions. There's no way out for me. I stand alone before God. I cannot blame anyone or anything for my failure to act or for wrongful action. I have a greater responsibility, but it is through that very freedom to act and to fail that I am more confident of the grace of God in my life. Because I do act, and the Lord knows I do fail. When I fail, I know his forgiveness is there for me. When I succeed, I know that my success has been granted by the grace of God. I stand alone in the freedom of the law to worship God in my own uniqueness and to serve him by serving my neighbor. Here again, the urging of St. Paul. Be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. We are commanded not only to hear and receive the word of God, but to live that word every day in every way. Jesus declares us to be free, free from the burdens of the law. But in that freedom lies great responsibility. The responsibility to act, utilizing our unique gifts and resources to worship God and to love our neighbors. Are you using your freedom? Do you live each day in the worship of God and love of your neighbor? Only you know the answer to those questions. But please remember, if you can't deliver